Hello, horror fan best friends and ghoulish knights, and welcome to the 42nd episode of Murders with Mertens. I am your host, Joe, and this is a podcast about horror, torture porn, body horror, folk horror, sci-fi horror, the horror-adjacent thrillers, the psychologically terrifying, scary films in general. Each episode, I sit down with a guest and discuss one of their favorite scary films so we can gush about everything that makes it just so damned cool. Viewers, thank you for the support. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. It certainly helps with the engagement. If you haven't already, maybe consider subscribing to the channel if you are so inclined. It's free to do, and you look cool doing it. Audio listeners, the show's also available on podcast services around the world like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so don't forget to leave a rating when you stop by. 5 stars is always appreciated. Super big shout out to Karl Gudding, who gifted me this awesome Michael Myers bobblehead. Thank you, Karl. Do him a solid and check out his YouTube show, How Many to .08, which is exactly the type of YouTube channel that it sounds like. Breathalyzers are involved. I'll leave the link in the show notes. Enough of all that housekeeping, though, because today I have the privilege of welcoming back for her second appearance, the one, the only, Kate Matlen-Remer. Kate, how the hell are you?
Doing great. I'm so excited to be here to talk about one of our mutual faves, Saw.
Yeah. We talked about this one before the episode that you were on before. I mean, perfect timing again as October is here. And after all, if it's Halloween, it must be Saw, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Today's film is the 2004 torture porn classic Saw, directed by James Wan, written by Lee Winnell, with the story written by Winnell and Wan. Kate, why Saw?
It's funny because I think back to when I first saw this movie, and I think what I loved most about it was that there was some like the mind bend nature of it, right? Like who did this? How did they do it? Why did they do it? There's a lot of puzzles that you have to kind of figure out when you watch it. And it's a little cheesy, a little campy, but it was like enough of a like kind of a mind bender to kind of keep you interested in the movie. And I also think too, not necessarily the biggest fan of where torture porn went, but this was sort of like torture porn light, right? Like the granddaddy, like before it kind of got too much. It's kind of all of those things put together.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very much Americanized of the grisly violence that had already started in like the French New Extremity with films from like the late 90s and early aughts that kind of went into the late 2000s. Movies like Alexandra Aja's High Tension, which is getting a nice new 4K release next month. And a guy I know, Prince Jackson, got to write one of the essays in it. That's super cool. But movies like that and Frontiers and Martyrs throughout the aughts. The French were getting pretty grisly with their horror films. And, you had the Americanized stuff like Saw that really kicked things off in the States. And, of course, sequels almost yearly after that. Then things like Hostel that, just really were pushing the envelope with that. I think this original Saw, though, while there is some grisly stuff in it, and at the time was probably kind of shocking, it's pretty tame in comparison to a lot of those others, especially the French.
For sure.
Oh yeah. Martyrs is kind of a one and done film for a lot of folks. Most people don't go back to that one. But this one's kind of cool. It's got a hell of a cast. It's shocking that for somebody's debut film with such a tiny budget, they got the people that they did in this thing. I mean, particularly Danny Glover and Carrie Ellis.
I know.
Yeah.
For sure. One question I have, I don't know if it's even available online, but I had read that Juan and Warnell that they had actually filmed basically like a one scene pilot from their script to sort of demo it to get them
Yeah.
funding. Is that even available somewhere? I
I
would love to
don't
see
know if
it.
it's available, but yeah, the short film where Winnell basically plays Shawnee Smith's character in the reverse bear trap,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
they use that to kind of shop themselves around Hollywood and break in. It's got to be out there somewhere, or maybe there's a version of it that's on one of the Saw discs or something.
Maybe.
That could be, but yeah, that'd be fun to see sometime because I certainly haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's how a lot of people break in with horror films too. There's a lot of people that do short films. Like hell, Mike Flanagan did a short version of Oculus before he really got going with a lot of his films. Um, yeah,
Have you seen
uh,
that?
not the short one, no, but of course, Oculus itself is pretty fun. Speaking of Flanagan, have you started Fall of the House of Usher yet?
I have not.
Oh, you got to get on that. It's so much
It's
fun. I
good.
binged it over the weekend. Yeah. Um, it's if you liked Midnight Mass, if you liked Haunting of Hill
Good.
House,
Yep.
you will enjoy the hell out of this one. Bruce Greenwood and Carla Gugino, just awesome. Just yeah.
I'll
Um,
check it out.
yeah, a little off topic there, but yeah, good stuff. Um, yeah, saw, plenty of other people in it too that, would go on in the aughts and the 2010s to do all sorts of other cool stuff like Michael
Mhm.
Emerson and
Yep.
yeah, it's God. And for what they were able to do with essentially most of the film in one room
Mm-hmm.
and, of course, the cheesy car chase that, clearly was done on a shoestring budget because there is no road. Um, when you get into how they filmed that, I mean, it's basically they just had the cars in a dark room, then they shook the cars a little bit and blew some smoke around them, very, very Star Trek disaster on the bridge, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but they still managed to eke out one hell of a cool movie. Um, yeah, let's see here. I mean, we kind of just start this film off right away with sounds of water, and then our one of our two leads here, Adam, waking up in a really gross looking bathtub. And the thing that I had the worst time catching in multiple viewings of this over the years
Mm-hmm.
is the light that you see
Yeah.
kind of floating through the water. And as his foot catches the drain stopper and pulls it out and the water goes down, this lighted thing slides down the drain with the water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we find out much later, future spoilers here that, unfortunately, this was the key that would have gotten him out of his shackles.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess, one tiny little like plot hole that drives me nuts, at least feels like a plot hole to me, is I mean, if this was intended to set him free, but it was done in such an easy way for it to, get lost right away as soon as he wakes up, it
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just doesn't feel, usually Jigsaw in these movies, again, future spoilers here, most of his games, his traps, there is a way out. There,
Right.
if you want it enough, if you, push yourself hard enough, you will survive.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a fucking idiot too, because some of these people clearly are. Um, but yeah, he just kind of bursts awake and, flops
Mm-hmm.
over the edge of the tub and, realizes that he's chained to a pipe and it's almost complete darkness in this room. Um, he kind of hears something and we hear a voice from elsewhere in the room. And, he's kind of having a freak out. Who are you? Did you put me here? Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, the voice says, wait a minute. And ultimately flips on a light, and it is the nastiest, grossest, like slaughterhouse style bathroom. Yeah, it's pretty foul.
And I
Uh,
think Adam even says it's a literal shithole.
yeah, I went to bed in my shithole apartment and woke up in an actual shithole, he says. Um,
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, with the lights coming on, it's revealed the two of them are also not alone, because there is a dead body in the middle of the room with a gunshot wound in the head, and it's holding a great big revolver and a micro cassette recorder in the other hand. And Adam, kind of gets a little grossed out, does some dry heaving here. And yeah, they kind of have their little freak out, who the fuck are you moment. And yeah, I will say, for having somebody with, clearly some amount of talent and everything, Carrie was maybe not the strongest performance in this film. At times it gets better, but
Mhm.
I'm not here to shit on this movie. I'm really not. But there's bits and pieces of it that, you're like, really, guys, really, that was the
Yeah.
take you went with. I don't know.
I
It's
didn't
funny.
buy the accents either. Like between Carrie Ellis and Lee,
Yeah, yeah. You got your British and your Australian accents.
Australian. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to be trying to be that American accent, and it's just kind of comes and
Hmm.
goes. Kind of comes
Yeah.
and goes. Um, at some point through their searching around of their surroundings, they realize that they both have envelopes in their pockets, and well, there's micro cassettes inside
Mhm.
and with "Play Me" written on them. Um, Carrie Ellis's character is Dr. Lawrence Gordon, and his also comes with a bullet. Um,
And a key.
oh, that's right. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But ultimately, they realize, hey, we need to get this micro cassette recorder, and
Hmm.
well, they can't quite reach.
Hmm.
Adam, he's on the side that's closest to it, and he kind of stretches out as far as he'd go, and nothing. I think Larry, he suggests using his shirt or something like that, and
Hmm.
he ends up doing a combination of the drain plug and his shirt, and eventually gets the recorder
Hmm.
over to him. Um, Plays his tape, and he's just encouraged to get out of his shackles and get out of the bathroom. Essentially,
Right.
that's really it. Um,
Hmm.
Eventually tosses the recorder over to Dr. Gordon there. He plays his, but he's instructed to kill Adam by 6 o'clock. It's a little after 10 in the morning. Um, well, I don't think we really know if it's morning or evening at this point,
Hmm.
because they're in a windowless room. But
But there
it's
is
a
a brand
little.
new clock on the wall.
Yes, yes. They noticed that right away, compared with
Hmm.
the state of everything else. It's clear, they say somebody wants them to know what time it is. Um,
Right.
and yeah, he's instructed on his tape that he's got to kill Adam by 6 o'clock. Otherwise, his wife and his daughter are going to die. Um,
Hmm.
well, that's a shocker for him. Um, yeah, and at this point, he's kind of listening back to the tape, freaking out a bit, but he hears a little bit of something at the end, and it's just another voice whispering, "Follow your heart." And he takes this clue, pretty in stride for somebody in the situation he's in. He, starts
Hmm.
looking around for a heart anywhere and tells Adam to do the same. And of course, they find a heart smeared in shit on the toilet tank. And yeah, Adam lifts that lid, and it's one of the most filthy, poopy toilets that you're apt to see in most films, other than maybe Train Spotting. Um, but yeah, he reaches his hand right in there. I like the line from Larry about, well, anything, and Adam's like, well, no solids. It's gross. Um, and then he's like, well, check the tank. And of course,
Mhm.
he opens up the tank, and there's a bag in there. And
And he's
what's like,
like, "Wish I
yeah,
would have checked that
right, right. At least he's got something to rinse his hand off with. But
But he didn't.
yeah, he really
So
doesn't.
disgusting.
It's really gross. Um, Inside said bag, he finds two hacksaws, and yeah, he just throws the bag into the tub, and
Mhm.
seems to have a little bit of weight to it, but we'll get to that later. Um, so he immediately starts going to town on his own chains and has to be asked to throw the other hacksaw to Larry, which he does. Thank God that doesn't get dropped because, to be fair, these are kind of fragile tools. They're a little rusty too. So I'm sure, they're not meant to survive much, which is very clear because Adam's hacksaw breaks almost immediately.
Mhm.
And Larry realizes, yeah, they're probably not intended to cut through these chains, but through their own ankles to be able
Mhm.
to get out of these bounds, um, which is kind of horrific. Um, let's see. It, is it at this point where Adam throws a little hissy fit and throws his saw into the mirror? Uh,
Yes,
Yeah, and it breaks off like a lower corner of it,
it does.
and we're not quite revealing what's there yet.
Mhm.
But but yeah, at this point when Larry realizes what's actually going on, he thinks he knows who may have put them there and what's happening, which freaks Adam out.
Mhm.
And Larry reveals that, yes, because about 5, 6 months ago, he was a suspect in this investigation for this killer. And we get some flashbacks from here,
Mhm.
where ultimately these cops, I think we're introduced to Dina Meyer's character at
Mhm.
this point from Starship Troopers and a ton of other
Mhm.
shit. Um, She's there at the scene
Mhm.
of a guy who's basically crawled his way through a bunch of razor wire to try to free himself from a cage and
Mhm.
cut himself so badly that he's bled out. I think they even mentioned that he managed to rip into his own stomach because they could find bile everywhere.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's another flash at one point or another of a guy that's covered in some sort of
Like
flammable
lighter
gel.
fluid, something,
Yeah.
yeah.
And given a candle to read combinations off of walls in a dark room to a safe that will ultimately give him the key to get out of his cell. Of course, that guy burns alive because,
Mhm.
he fucks up with
Like
the
holding a
candle.
candle.
Yeah, yeah, and covered in something flammable. Yeah, nice job, buddy. But yeah, it's established that this killer not only removes pieces of his victim's skin in the shape of his jigsaw puzzle piece, but also doesn't actually kill his victims, although technically you could say he does. But
Mhm.
but yeah, he puts them in situations where they either kill themselves or because of their inaction are killed
Mhm.
because of the traps or games, as he refers to them, um, what they end up doing. Um, so yeah, there was a pen light that was found at one of the crime scenes, and it turns out that I don't know how they figure it out. Either it's got his name on
Fingerprints,
it or
maybe?
fingerprints, and he's in a database or something. Yeah,
Mhm.
but it leads them to Dr. Gordon, who is at the hospital doing his rounds. I think he's an oncologist, and he's got a bunch of interns or students of some sort around him, and they're over the bed of this interesting character. Who, if you look very, very closely, apparently on his bedside table, you see plans for the reverse bear trap.
I did not notice that.
Yeah, I read
Really?
about this, but I have not been able to catch it myself. I'm gonna have to
Oh,
go
I need
back
to
and
go
look at the
back.
scene. Yeah. He talks about how this guy's got a brain tumor, and the guy's just sleeping there. And there's an orderly that pipes up from behind him, and it's Michael Emerson. Who talks about how the guy's name is John, and he's a really interesting guy. Yeah, sounds nothing like that. But he kind of brushes, Gordon just sort of brushes him off and says, yes, our intern or our orderlies develop strong attachments to their patients. As he's just trying to get everybody out of there. And I think it's here where the police arrive. You've got Detective Tapp and Detective, I think it's Singh,
Mhm.
portrayed by somebody else from Lost. I can't think of the actor's name at the moment, but yeah, there's all sorts of people from Lost and other
Mhm.
shit from this time period. It's fun. And ultimately, they take him back to his office and they ultimately get at why they're there, and they take him downtown where they question him, and his alibi eventually clears him. But before he leaves, they want him to, for whatever reason, witness a testimony from one of Jigsaw's victims who managed to free herself recently. It's a weird timing thing there.
And it's weird that they would ever have a cleared suspect listen in on testimony of a witness that could be used, right? Like that doesn't seem like that would happen normally. But
Yeah. Other than the fact that his alibi cleared him, maybe, but it still feels kind of suspect, right?
mhm, mhm,
But yeah, she starts to recount her experience, and we get her flashback within this flashback then of waking up with this lovely device, just like it's described, sort of a reverse bear trap. It's a massive metal jaws, I guess, that are
mhm,
wired into her own jaws. And when a timer goes off, a spring will force them apart in horrific fashion. And
mhm,
this is all described to her by a TV that pops on in front of her with a little video of Billy, the puppet. Um, we only see Billy's face, and the mouth moves a little bit, but it's clearly Jigsaw's voice telling her what kind of situation she's found herself in. So yeah, basically tells her once the timer goes off, she'll get about a minute, and then she gets to see on the video what will happen if she goes beyond this time.
mhm, mhm,
The video also tells her that there's a body with her in the room, and in the body's stomach is a key to release her from the reverse bear trap.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, the video signs off, and she's freaking the fuck out. And little does she know, it's her standing up that will kick off the timer.
mhm.
Because it's
There's like a
a
pin, right?
yeah, it's like a
That's
cotter pin or
attached. It
something like that.
snaps
Yeah.
out. Mhm,
hmm So she gets out of there and she hears it go off, and she hears the ticking, and her eyes get so crazy wide. It's great.
mhm,
Um, but she, yeah, kind of eventually, after freaking out a bit, makes her way over to this body. And yeah, unfortunately, this person is alive.
mhm.
I guess it's one of the producers of the film that plays the body too.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, they must have been really hurting for cast members at this point or something. I mean, it is a very small budget. It's like somewhere between 1 and
Mhm.
2 million, something like that. Um,
Or someone
but
always wanted to be an actor.
yeah, that could be too. That could be. But yeah, she cuts into this poor dude's stomach and sorts through his guts and eventually finds her key and frees herself. Um,
Like, just in time too.
yeah, yeah, it's very James Bond countdown, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, she frees herself and finishes up recounting her story to the detectives. And yeah,
Well, and
it's
then
awful.
after she does, Billy the puppet like tricycles into the room.
So the puppet, you can't talk about the puppet without mentioning James Wan's love for giallo,
Mhm.
Italian horror films, specifically out of like the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. There is a film, Deep Red. It's one of Dario Argento's more famous films that has this little like ventriloquist looking dummy thing that in a very famous scene towards the end of the movie comes flying out of this doorway at this character who smashes it to pieces before he himself is killed by the actual killer. And it's a fun little nod to that. Also, seeing um, just the killer by his gloves and not really
Mhm.
seeing anything else of the killer. They're like black leather gloves. It's a big nod to, this genre and specifically this film. The
Mhm.
actual gloves from Deep Red show up in Malignant. If you haven't
Oh,
seen
really?
yeah, it's the gloves that the killer is using in that movie.
Mhm.
But yeah, he clearly has a love for the genre, so much so that he ended
Mhm.
up trying to make his own. And some people
I mean,
love,
Billy the
some people,
puppet's awesome.
yeah, yeah. Well, and his own, giallo film, sort of Malignant. People either love it or they hate it, but they really don't seem to have any middle ground with that one. I personally
Mhm.
think it's kind of genius, but there are people I know that absolutely despise it. I say give him all the money and let him do what he wants again, which is clearly what they did with that film. So
Mhm.
yeah, the puppet just kind of wheels in and
Well,
yeah,
well, I think isn't this when the puppet kind of says like people don't appreciate life
right,
and now you
right.
do. So you're getting a sense of the like intent of Jigsaw, who we don't really know yet. Um, that he's trying to impart wisdom in people that maybe don't appreciate life.
Yeah,
By
yeah,
literally putting them in these torturous situations where they're having to
yeah.
like make some really
And
disturbing
he's
decisions.
yeah, and he's picking specific people because
Hmm.
they're either horrible people themselves or there's
Right.
something going on with them where he
Right.
wants to give them this opportunity to, find a better
View
life in
life in a
some
different
way.
way. Yeah, like
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
one of the flashbacks that we see is someone who tried to commit suicide, and then that was the guy that had to crawl through razor wire and cut himself
Mhm.
again to live. I can't remember what the
Yeah,
candle guy. What was his
no, and he had to
backstory?
walk around in a bunch of broken glass too, in addition to
Yeah,
being smeared with this flammable gel.
I can't
So
remember his backstory, but I think Amanda, who is the bear trap
mhm.
survivor, she was a drug addict.
Yep, yep. And the detectives ask her then, well, do you appreciate what he did for you? And
Hmm.
she's like, yeah, I
He
do
saved me.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, oof, yeah, that's a hell of a way to be saved, but
Hmm.
because you can see on her face too the wounds from this thing being
Hmm.
wired into her jaw. Um, it's something. Um, Tap, of course, he's kind of obsessed. Danny Glover's character, he's kind of obsessed with the case, as your movie detectives are, and
Hmm.
he's looking at the video, photos from the place where Amanda was kept, and they finally they see this identifying mark from like a local gang or something like that,
Hmm.
and they realize where this probably was, and so they hop in the car and head on down there, and yeah, they find Jigsaw's workshop pretty easily, um and under one tarp is Billy the puppet, right?
Hmm.
But under another is another victim who is hooked up in this trap. We don't quite get the gist of what this trap is until someone comes home a little early. So they
Mhm.
throw the tarp back over the guy and ask him to be quiet. Oh God. And they hide, and someone in a robe enters the room, and they spring their trap on him, but he turns the tables and activates the trap on this guy. It's
Mhm.
basically two drills that are aimed at the sides of the guy's head that slowly work their way in on a timer. And Jigsaw tells him, "Hey, you could capture me, or and let this guy die, or you can, let me go and save him." Um, and ultimately, they kind of opt to try to do both. Um, Tap's partners Singh ends up shooting off the drills to save the guy, and Jigsaw kind of tears off down some hallways.
Well,
Ultimately,
he sliced
oh
Danny
yeah,
Glover's
first,
neck.
yes. He's got this blade that pops out of his wrist, kind of like Assassin's Creed or something like that.
Yeah.
And gets Tap's neck right across the throat. Doesn't kill him, but he motions for Singh, that he's okay enough to,
Mhm.
go ahead and, have him go after Jigsaw instead. And Singh follows him down some creepy hallways, and unfortunately springs a trap of his own with a bunch of shotguns aimed downward into a doorway. And he just steps through a tripwire, and um, has a very bad day, um, which is kind of a horrible shame. I liked
Mhm.
Singh and Tap together. I thought they were a fun pair there, but
Mhm.
yeah, he's dead, and I think is it after this that we come back to the present
Mhm.
with I think it's the flashback of like the night that Gordon
The
was
night before, yeah.
captured, or the night
Mhm.
before, or something
Mhm.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where his daughter's having a nightmare or something, and says that there's a man in her room, and she doesn't
Mhm.
want her mom, played by Monica Potter. Nope. She wants her dad. And he's like too busy to immediately respond. And this pisses off mom, cause he's
Mhm.
busy typing away at something on his computer. Um, he needs a bigger monitor because he is hunched over this thing with his face jammed into it like crazy. Um, but yeah, he finishes up and goes to deal with his daughter, and they're cute and everything. He's a little over the top with her for whatever her age is there, but yeah, he checks closet and all that crap, and he puts her to bed, and of course he's got to leave and go to the hospital.
Mhm.
He gets paged, and this is, of course, the perfect moment for his wife to just go off on him about how, what is this? Are you happy? You don't seem happy. I'm
Mhm.
not happy, and things seem kind of rough, and he plays it off as he's perfectly happy. He just has to go to work
Mhm.
and blah blah blah.
Right.
And he leans in for a kiss, and she just recoils. Um, then I think she goes back, or rather, after he leaves, I think she hears her daughter scream, or just goes
Mhm.
to check on her or something. And of course, you have this shrouded figure looming over her daughter's bed. Um, yeah. And ultimately, they are both held captive.
Mhm.
I don't know if we see them tied up at this point or not.
Mm-mm.
Um, but ultimately, the assailant has them tied up in the apartment while they are watching Adam and Larry on a monitor in the bathroom. Um, yeah. We eventually go back to Larry and Adam. Um, well, no, even before this, we get a flash of Tap, 5 months on from getting his throat sliced, he's no longer police, but
Mhm.
he's monitoring Larry's apartment from an apartment across the street, and he sees um, Michael Emerson's character Zepp peeking out a window. He's like, "Who are you? What are you doing there?" And
Right.
um,
Well,
yeah,
and the apartment that Danny Glover, his character's in, it's like literally floor to ceiling news articles about
right. He's
faces
obsessed.
and Jigsaw. Like clearly he thinks that Dr. Gordon is Jigsaw and he's just fixated on it, like avenging his partner's death and, catching Jigsaw. So he's staking out, trying to catch Dr. Gordon,
Right.
basically.
He's never given up that,
No.
this guy was his prime suspect in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. At one point or another here, um, they discover in the bathroom that this mirror is a one-way mirror and there's a camera behind it. I think they end up
Yeah.
like throwing something else around the room or something.
He
Um,
I think
I'm
Adam gets
fuzzy on,
mad at Dr.
yeah.
Gordon and he grabs the piece of glass that broke off earlier. And when he
Okay.
looks at it, he sees that it's
That it's one
two-sided
way.
mirror.
Yep, you're right. You're right. You're
Yep.
right. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and then I think then we get the shot of the person in Gordon's apartment watching on the monitors and
Mm-hmm.
the girls tied up. Um, so is it how do they end up finding the box with the cigarettes and the lighter and the cell phone?
So I think Dr. Gordon, he's talking about his wife and daughter, or yeah, and he wants to show Adam a picture, so he chucks his wallet over to Adam, and instead of
Right.
that picture is actually a photo of like a Polaroid of the wife and daughter,
Mhm.
you know, basically tied up and gagged, and there's a message on the back which I think is from it's signed with Jigsaw's name and the little puzzle
Mhm.
piece, and basically says X marks the spot, you can see more with your eyes closed or something like that.
Right, right. And there's a moment at some point a little bit later after they discover they're being monitored where
Mhm.
Adam reveals that yeah, there was this photo in your wallet because he
Right, but
hides it from Gordon at
he doesn't
first.
tell right away, right?
Yeah.
He says, Adam tells Dr. Gordon turn off the lights, and they see an X
Mhm.
in like glow in the dark paint, and they turn the lights back on. They're like, why didn't we see that before, right? And it
Yeah,
hadn't
and
probably been
it's glow in the dark.
charged,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So you need the light to charge it up. Yep. And I think
So
they
then
even
Gordon
comment
goes
on that
in and
too.
he like finds the box,
Okay, so that's where they find that then.
right?
Yep. And then
And
it's
then he realizes that the key from his envelope at the very beginning,
that didn't fit any of the locks, right?
no,
Yep.
yeah, fits
Yep.
the box.
Yep. There we go. And it's around here that they start discussing how they were abducted.
Hmm.
And, we start with Adam talking about how, yeah, he basically came home from a job and, he was going through his dark room, where he develops his photos in his apartment and he could hear somebody elsewhere in the apartment. And so he is, in flashback, of course, they show him walking through a dark apartment using his camera with the flash. I think the power maybe gets cut off and that's
It
why.
does. Hmm.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
was such a brilliant horror scene. It's terrifying.
I forget I think it's a Hitchcock film that it's a reference to. Um of going around and trying to use the flash to
Hmm.
find, and I can't think if it's like Rear Window or something like that. Um but it is cool. And it's one of
Mhm.
those things where, you expect things to happen in threes, right? Where, there's like three flashes and then something happens or something like that, but it doesn't,
Yeah, but not no. Yeah.
yeah, it's,
First, actually, he keeps shooting, and he finds Billy the puppet sitting in a chair.
yeah, and it kind of rolls out again, like he does. Um,
I think he like he offs Billy with a
yeah,
bat.
he grabs a baseball bat and he beats the shit out of this puppet, and it's got that laugh, that like
Uh-huh.
recorded Joker laugh type thing, um,
Mhm.
which kind of breaks down as he pummels this thing. Yeah, you got to appreciate that. They built this puppet from scratch for this movie too. This
Mhm.
wasn't, like a modified thing. It wasn't, some other IP that, they wanted to bring in. No, no, they
Mhm.
just made this thing from some paper mache and, whatever else. It's great. It has
Mhm.
become, super iconic. What was that awful Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston movie where he's a plastic surgeon and they're going around the party discussing all of his
Oh
former
yeah.
works? And look, the lady from Saw, and she's got the super tight lips, but super puffy, rosy cheeks, looks just like Billy the Puppet from Saw.
That's true.
Yeah. See, iconic. Um,
Mhm.
But yeah, ultimately, with one of the flashes, he's nabbed by somebody in some kind of a robe and this horrific pig mask.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's spooky. It's good. It's
Mhm.
effective. I like it. Um, and ultimately, I think around here, Gordon starts to remember that something similar kind of happened to him. Um, it seems like it takes a while for Gordon to ultimately recount his abduction,
Mhm.
um, because we get a flash of him, not going to the hospital.
Mhm.
He's going to see this woman who,
Like a
he
seedy motel.
yeah. And ultimately, it's talked about like, yes, he's cheating on his wife. At least that's the reason why he's in this situation. But it's almost like they try to make it out like, no, he really wasn't, and something else
Mhm.
was going on. It's not the most clear thing.
I thought maybe he was because he's an oncologist, maybe he was doing like end of life care that was maybe not like sanctioned by the FDA or something like that. Like he
Yeah,
was doing on the slide treatment or something.
that could be. Yeah. It could just be that, him screaming at Adam about how he was not having an affair was
Mhm.
just him being upset about the situation, being upset about his wife and daughter being held captive, that,
Mhm.
he's still gonna, deflect and deny. And,
Mhm.
even though it's like, okay, you got. If
Right.
you were having an affair, just fucking admit it at this point.
Right.
Um, but I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, because we keep getting like back and forths of him walking through this parking garage, and you can see that he realizes his photos being taken. Um, we at one point or another with this box that they open up with the cigarettes and the phone and everything, they realize that they can't make any calls out with the phone, and they
Mhm.
just sort of assume that it's been rigged to only receive incoming calls.
Mhm.
I don't know why you would just assume that, but hey, it's ultimately how this movie plays out. Um, but yeah, he does get a call at some point here, and it's his daughter on the phone
Mhm.
crying and, just absolutely freaked out about how the man from her room has them. And
Mhm.
ultimately the phone does get passed over, and he doesn't know what the fuck is going on while he is listening to all this, but the phone is passed over to his wife, who is clearly just telling him what she has been told to tell him,
Mhm.
about how not to trust Adam. how Adam knows about him, has known all about him from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, before he's able to get much more information, the phone just kind of cuts out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Um,
I
so
can't remember when. I can't remember if it was before when we see Dr. Gordon with the picture being taken in a parking lot after he left the woman in the room he was visiting with. Was it then that you see him trying to get out of the parking garage and how he got abducted, or was it later that we see
I
that
think it's after Adam admits to taking
that
his
he okay,
photographs.
okay.
Yeah. Um, because they argue quite a bit at this point, and
Mhm.
ultimately, Adam does admit that he was paid to take his photograph for the past few nights. He was paid by some stranger $200 a night. And as you're listening to all of this, you're thinking, okay, yeah, he was hired by the killer. He was hired by Jigsaw to do all this. And, Gordon keeps pressing him, like, well, what did the guy look like? And he's like, I don't
Mhm.
know. I didn't keep a detailed record of, and ultimately admits, yeah, he was a black man with a big scar across his neck. And
Mhm.
Gordon realizes, oh shit, it's Tap.
Right.
This, this detective, and they get into how, well, he's not a detective any longer. He's a former detective, but he was
Mhm.
thrown off the case after he became obsessive after Singh's death. And ultimately, he's been after Gordon all this time, never giving up the
Mhm.
idea that, he was the killer.
Mhm.
And it's at around this point that Adam gets all these photos out of the bag that had the hacksaws that he threw into the tub. Um, and yeah, they show all these photos ultimately of Adam, or of
Mhm.
Larry
Dr.
Gordon here.
Gordon.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and it's at this point that the Gordon, somewhere around here, remembers being abducted by the person in the pig mask in the
Mhm.
garage. And, but also, as they're looking at all these photos, they see a photo of the orderly Zepp from the
Mhm.
hospital. And Gordon realizes that he has something to do with all of this.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, yeah. From here, I think he also finally understands that this affair or alleged affair is the reason that he's there at this point.
Mhm.
I don't know why it takes him so long to figure this out after, everybody has something in their past that's the reason why they're in one of these situations with Jigsaw.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, he finally understands it's the alleged affair. Um, and yeah, I think Adam finds the photo in the stack of the captor, which turns out to be Zepp. Um, and yeah, they try to play this game with like there was something on one of the recordings about the dead person in the room with them, how their blood was filled with poison, and that's why the person
Mhm.
killed themselves. And they try to make it seem like Gordon is loading the one of the cigarettes up with a bunch of the blood to try to poison Adam. And
Right.
yeah,
Those were
I
in the
think
box that they found behind the
yes,
axe.
yeah, there were
Yeah.
like two cigarettes and a lighter along with the phone.
Mhm.
And I think they even turn off the lights to kind of whisper to each other about what they're going to
Mhm.
do because they're going to try
Right.
to fake out whoever's watching them.
Mhm.
Um, and they throw the cigarette over and he lights up and we get the fakest death scene ever. Got Leo Waddell just acting his heart out there. but then we also discover that the person watching can deliver an electrical charge through the chains,
Mm-hmm.
and basically zaps him awake. And it's 6 o'clock, and they realize it's too late. And oh crap! And back at Gordon's apartment, um, well, he sees that Adam hasn't been killed, and it's time to go kill the girls. So at this point, Allison, Gordon's wife, has basically freed herself and is trying to free her daughter. And they hear him coming, so they pretend to be tied up, like you do. Um, and he comes in to kill them, and she attacks him. They tussle. The gun's going off. I think also Zepp has called Gordon again at this point so that he can
Mm-hmm.
hear him killing his wife and daughter.
Yeah.
Um, and so you get Gordon freaking out in the bathroom, listening to his daughter crying and screaming, and you can hear the signs of struggle and hear the gun going off. And across the street, you've got Tap, who's monitoring them, seeing the gunshots going off, hearing them from across the street. And he takes off running over to, stop whatever's happening or whatever. He figures it's probably Jigsaw. So, hey, here we go. Let's make it happen. Um, and yeah, in the struggle, I mean, I can't remember if Zepp really like gets the upper hand, except now like Tap bursts in or something like that. I can't remember
Mm-hmm.
exactly how it plays out, but yeah, I mean, Tap ultimately rescues them and basically chases off after Zepp into the sewers. Um, and at one point or another here in their firefight, he gets shot in the chest. Um, and Zepp gets away to get off to the bathroom here where our leads are being held.
Mm-hmm.
As all this gunfire is happening, it's close enough to the bathroom that these sewers are somewhere nearby.
Mm-hmm.
Its geography is not a strong suit of this film. Um, but um, but Gordon can hear all this stuff going on, and he's freaking out, and he ends up getting shocked, and he the cell phone gets flung out of his hands, um, which tells me that the shocks probably aren't coming from Zepp so much, but
Mm-hmm.
somewhere
Somewhere else.
else. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna find out soon enough, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, uh, he's just having the biggest freak out trying to reach out for the cell phone, which is basically like somewhere between a foot and 18 inches out of his reach. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like trying with the box to kind of like reach out and grab it, but that's still not close enough. I don't know why he just doesn't take off his shirt and try to use his shirt to kind of, you know, I mean, it worked well enough with the other guy's shirt and the drain stopper with the chain when they
Mm-hmm.
earlier on, but yeah, yeah, he's kind of losing his mind at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at this point, he kind of knows what he needs to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he grabs the hacksaw and he ties off his leg, and he does what he needs to do and starts sawing away.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate the hell out of the makeup job on Cary Elwes throughout the rest of this movie, because wow, is he pale after doing
Mm-hmm.
this. Um, but yeah, he saws on through his ankle there, and goes over and gets the gun and loads it up with the one bullet, and he's got to do what he's got to do. He's been instructed to kill Adam, and he's gonna do it. And he can barely aim this thing. You could see he's like struggling to maintain consciousness here at this point. And he ends up shooting him, and Adam drops. And I think it's at this point that the door opens behind him, and Zepp comes in, and Gordon fires his empty gun at him a few times, because he understands who he is at this point. And he's like, well, the rules are the rules. You didn't kill him in time, so now I got to kill you. And I think he's like just checking on Adam first, and turns around to confront Gordon. But it's at this point where Adam rises up behind him and beats the ever-loving shit out of him with the lid from the toilet tank. And those are pretty heavy and decent bludgeon. And he does the damn job there. And ultimately, they don't have any way of getting Adam out of his chains. And Gordon, he's like, I gotta go and try to save my wife and daughter here, and I'll get you help. And tries to promise him that, and he crawls his way out of the room, with Adam freaking out about being left behind there. But so at this point, Adam starts searching Zepp's body, hoping to find a key or something. And unfortunately, he finds another microcassette recorder. And it's like, oh, God, what the fuck? And plays the tape. And it is a nice recording that was left for Zepp about how Zepp had been poisoned, and he only had a certain amount of time to do a specific task, and only Jigsaw had the antidote for the poison. And ultimately, he needed to kill a man's wife and child to survive. And while he's listening to all of this, just outside his periph, we see the body in the center of the room start to rise up very, very slowly, and remove a makeup effect from his head. And it's revealed it's John, the cancer patient from earlier in the film. And when Adam realizes what's happening, he takes Zepp's gun and tries to aim it at John, but John gives him a little zap. Again, he was the one who was in control all along with that. Some kind of remote that he had, just kind of palmed or something. But
front row seat too.
Yep, because there was the comment from the detective played by Dina Meyer earlier about how there was a hole in the wall of that second victim that they were talking about, and how Jigsaw liked that front row seat. Yeah. Yep. So he had been there the whole time, playing dead, effectively playing dead too. I don't know how you control your breathing that well that nobody can notice, but he did it.
Also, he was like laying next to the pool of blood with the poison. Like,
well, I don't think it
kind of
was
bizarre.
actually poisoned, really. Because otherwise Adam probably would have died with that cigarette, right? But yeah, I mean, seriously, he never flinched, he never twitched, he never farted, nothing. It's nope. Either amazing control, or he had drugged himself on, with something that would have had, movie logic, of course, a specific time before he was able to, kind of wake back up again. But yeah, all of this is happening, and you get the awesome Charlie Clouser score, of course, famous from Nine Inch Nails and doing the, the music for American Horror Story and plenty of other cool stuff. Great composer. But the famous Saw score just swells. And you know this music in all the sequels because it always
Mm-hmm.
rises up when the big twist happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get this series of flashbacks of all the little clues and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
also Jigsaw's messages to all of his victims or people that he's trying to save. Who can say?
Mm-hmm.
But but as Adam is realizing what's happening, all of this stuff flashing past us, and John basically telling him, "Hey, the key to your release was in the bathtub this whole time." And
Mm-hmm.
we get the little flash of the thing going down the drain. Again, I don't think it was very fair for it to be set up in that way, that it would just go down the
Mm-hmm.
drain. That seems kind of antithetical to Jigsaw's MO there, but minor quibble. Um, but yeah, if Adam tries to shoot him, he zaps him, like we said. And as John exits the bathroom, he tells him game over as he seals the door, and Adam screams and rages into, basically nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And credits, because that is Saw.
Mm-hmm.
In comparison to some of the sequels, it is a very simple film, and
It
yet
is.
we were losing ourselves as we're recounting things because it's complicated enough and they jump around enough that, and like I had mentioned earlier to you before we started, I didn't take the best notes this time around. I was a
Oh
little
no,
short
it's
on
good.
time, but this fucking movie,
I
man.
It's awesome. And I love too
Yeah.
at the end. There's so many open like pieces of it, right? Like we don't know what happens to John and Jigsaw. We
Mm-hmm.
don't know what happened to Carrie Elwes's character, Dr. Gordon. We
Yep.
don't know what happened to Tap. So there's just like it leaves open the
Yeah.
opportunity for a sequel or
Yep.
your
And I
interpretation.
have not seen all of the sequels, but
I am not either.
yeah, 2 and 3 are actually really good.
Agreed.
And
And I
it kind of
love
goes off the
the
rails after that,
Amanda
but
like the Amanda, like what Amanda becomes. Is
yeah,
yeah.
kind of a disciple of John, and
Mm-hmm.
then um, but yeah, it's funny how much gets retconned in these movies because
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to at a certain point to continue introducing new plot points.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, this movie has enough hanging threads that you're able to do that kind of thing, and that was very fortunate for them, I'll
Mm-hmm.
say. Um, but I know there's the famous story of Carrie Ellis, how he had basically contracted for like a percentage of the gross, and he wasn't quite paid all of that. So there was legal drama and so on. They settled out of court eventually. But because of all this, he didn't come back for the sequels until I want to say Saw 3D. Um,
I didn't realize that.
yeah. He got a little short shrift.
Mm-hmm.
He was paid. I mean, originally something like 52,000 and some change, and then he made a little over 1 million off of the movie itself afterwards, but it still wasn't quite what he was supposed to be getting. Um, so there was a little bit of bad blood with that. Um, yeah, it, I didn't find a lot of trivia that jumped out at me at like over the top interesting about this film,
Mm-hmm.
other than, just the the history of the short film, and
Mm-hmm.
Juan and Winnell, who were friends from film school, who basically this was going to be their way to break into Hollywood, and Juan was going to direct and Winnell was going to act, and if they couldn't get that, they were going to keep shopping because they were
Mm-hmm.
not going to let this movie get made without them. And thank God for that, because Juan has been such a fun director, and Winnell turned into a really fun director too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he directed that Upgrade, which is a really underrated little weird body horror movie. But also that super fun modern adaptation of The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. Um, if
I
you
did not know
haven't
that was
seen
him.
it,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's so good too.
Mm-hmm.
And he's written quite a bit more and acted here and there. But yeah, the two of them have been real powerhouses. I mean, God, look at Juan.
Yeah, for sure.
He, oof,
Insidious,
yeah,
Conjuring, right?
between the whole Conjuring cinematic
Mm-hmm.
universe and Insidious, and he's done at least one Fast and Furious movie.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just also Aquaman. And then there's the second one. He's made a hell of a name for himself, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just kind of well known for doing one film and kind of kicking off a franchise that makes a shit ton of money. So good for
Mm-hmm.
him. Good for
Yeah,
him.
definitely.
And again, more people need to watch Malignant. I'm just saying, it's genius. Um, but yeah, Saw at the end of the day, relatively simple film, and I think that's part of its charm. The
Mm-hmm.
two people trapped in a room together, working out, what exactly they have to do to survive, why they're there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, has spawned the modern version of laser tag escape rooms.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you'd have escape rooms if it weren't for Saw. It's it, this fucking movie.
That's a good
It's
point.
yeah, it's something. It's something.
Mm-hmm.
Again, great cast, awesome score. Um, yeah, I need to get caught up on these movies so I can see this
Mm-hmm.
most recent installment. I don't
Yeah, for sure.
really understand, what the temperature was on this one, if people liked it or not. But yeah, at least the first few are a lot of fun. And I have been told, if you're willing to go into all of the sequels, suspend some disbelief and just go along for the bonkers ride.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're, kind of bad movies, you're still going to have some fun. I might need to do that eventually here.
Maybe
Yeah,
maybe I'll do that like leading up to Halloween. We've got a week and a
yeah,
half,
yeah.
couple
That'll
weeks.
be something fun. Um, I know I still have at least one specific film that I need to partner up on a podcast for with somebody here before Halloween. But otherwise, I'm going to clear the schedule and just watch a bunch of scary movies for fun because,
Awesome.
it's the time of year to do it, right?
For sure. Are you gonna watch
Ah,
Reincarnation?
I really want to do that. Yeah, we had talked about that with your previous episode, and
Yeah.
talking about the After Dark Horror Fest movies, and that one is so much fun. I need to get into that. I know there's another horror podcast out there called oh, is it the one I'm thinking of? No, it's don't get me wrong. I like Murder Moose podcast. I think they're fun and they have a good time. But no, it wasn't them I was thinking of. It was Nightlight, a horror movie podcast that is doing Ringu sometime super soon. And it might
Nice.
be fun to rewatch that one in time
Mm-hmm.
to listen to that one. But yeah, Saw was a good time. I was glad to watch this again, a couple times here in the past week to get ready for this. And it's always fun to talk with you about movies. It's I'm
Awesome. It's so
glad we
great
were
to hang
able to
out.
do this. Yeah, it's this is probably the first episode of Murders with Mertens where we've had a couple of cocktails throughout the course of talking about the film. So if things got a little sloppy towards the end, that's your explanation. But you know, it helps to lubricate the conversation there as well sometimes, for sure. But
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. Again, good to be able to catch up with you. Glad that we were able to talk about this one. Kate, any final thoughts on Saw?
Watch it. Anyone who hasn't seen it, watch it. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. It's definitely one of those movies where I can't believe that it's nearly 20 years old.
I know.
God,
Wild.
where does the time go? I was not this gray back then. Holy crap. But it happens to the best of us, I guess. If you'd like, Kate, where can people find you?
Instagram, to the stars backwards.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, this has been Murders with Mertens, a horror film podcast. Thank you for letting us tickle your ear holes. Please like, share, and subscribe if you are so inclined. I'll be back soon enough with another episode. But until next time, stay spooky, everyone.